Well, joining us now from California is Philippe Billon. He's a Fulbright Visiting Research Chair on Canadian Studies at UC Berkeley and an Associate Professor at the University of British Columbia. With us here in Washington, D.C. in our studio is Patrick Hedger. He's the Policy Director of American Encore. From North Carolina via Skype, we're joined by David Gessner. He's a professor at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington and the author of 9 books. Also joining us is Jason Kowalski. He's the U.S. Policy Director with the international environmental organization 350.org. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Philippe, let me start with you. And of course, oil is a big deal for Canada. The country earns a lot of money from oil. And when this decision was announced, the new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, said he was disappointed, but he echoed President Obama's sentiments that the relationship between the two countries is bigger than just one project. So, given that the president has rejected this, how big a setback is this for Canada?
I think it's a major setback in terms of potential outputs, but one has to remember that the tar sands production is slowing down at the moment, and as such, there is not so much of an immediate need for outlets. At the moment, it's estimated that around 500,000 barrels will be shipped per day in the coming 3 to 4 years as new projects come online. Those have been well advanced already. So I would say that Justin Trudeau probably has some slack, maybe a year or two, and then the pressure will crank up to find a solution.
Patrick, one of the arguments we've heard for a long time about why this project should go ahead is that it would create jobs here in the United States. I just want to throw out some figures. The State Department did an analysis, and it said that Keystone would support 42,000 construction jobs. This is in the period during which the pipeline would be constructed, which would last about 2 years. But in the end, it would only create 35 permanent jobs. And given those figures, does that merit support for the project?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly jobs, I mean, those job figures are better than no jobs. But I think looking at the jobs figure as a defense for this project, the pipeline, is really sort of a distraction that conservatives have fallen into. I mean, we shouldn't judge whether things can be built in this country based on how many jobs they'll create. We don't ask grocery stores how many jobs they'll create when they want to open up in a neighborhood. And so what this really signals, though, is that there is a lack of freedom of commerce in the United States, that you're going to major corporations are going to come under political scrutiny from the highest of levels when they're simply trying to build the infrastructure they need to do business. And I think that's the point that conservatives should be harping on, because, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of disagreement about how many jobs it would create, and the State Department as well said, oh, this is actually going to reduce carbon emissions as well. So the State Department's put out a lot of interesting points there, and which really begs into question why they went with this decision when certainly it's the more carbon-friendly alternative.
David, does Patrick have a point there saying that, you know, government should not interfere when big corporations want to build infrastructure?
I think he does, and I think Jessica has a point, but I think we're looking at it in too small a way. As Bill McKibben, the founder of 350.org, said, this is a big crisis, and this is both an important actual step and a symbolic step in fighting against a crisis. I agree with Jessica that the Paris talks and the oil prices are key. But three bigger things that McKibben would say would be the state of the scientific situation where we're going to go over 350, the fact that alternative energy is thriving, and thirdly, that activism, this is a huge win. Environmentalists, we're pitiful, pathetic folk. We always lose. Hey, we won one. And I think it's a day, no matter what side you're on. I'm a Red Sox fan in Boston, and I sometimes root for the Yankees if it's like Derek Jeter. Let's toast Bill McKibben. The guy busted his butt for 7 years, focused on this, and it was a win. Will it be a momentum-changing win? We'll see. But right now, it's a win, and for young environmentalists, it's an exciting moment.
I have to interject there. I don't think it's much of a win, considering that 8,000 miles of crude oil pipeline was built in the United States between when TransCanada applied for the permit and when President Obama ultimately made this decision last week. So it's
totally agree with you on the actuality. But, you know, I just wrote a book about Ed Abbey and Wallace Stegner, and the power of symbol is big. The power of shifting consciousness is big. Yeah. And the only way anything big is going to happen here is with that. So it's a little momentum. You're right, factually.
Okay,
I agree, and I've got to say that as an activist who's been fighting this pipeline for the last 5 years, day in, day out, climate activists, indigenous activists from along the route, farmers and ranchers standing up for their land. This is a big deal. It's not just a big deal in the US, this is a big deal globally. It's the first time ever that a world leader has stood up to a fossil fuel project because of its impact on climate change. Yes, that'll help President Obama quite a bit in Paris, and hopefully it's a harbinger of great things to come across the world. Here are the facts. If we're going to stop climate change, we've got to leave.
One moment, David, I'll get to you in a moment.
Here are the facts. If we're going to stop climate change, we've got to leave 80% of fossil fuels in the ground. That's got to start somewhere, and it's starting now with the Keystone XL pipeline.
Right, but Jason, do you agree that this is more symbolic?
No, absolutely not. No. Organizing stopped this pipeline. Grassroots organizing kept fossil fuels in the ground. By stopping Keystone XL, by fighting other tar sands pipelines, we've landlocked the tar sands. We've made it impossible to get that dirty, dirty fuel to market.
Okay, let me put that question to Philippe. Philippe,
yes.
Is the tar sands project now locked up, as Jason says, or is Canada simply going to look for other outlets to export its oil?
I think the latest study shows 89% of landlockedness, meaning there is only about 11% of space left in pipelines for extra shipments. So there is a good point there. Of course, there is railway, but railway is expensive. It's about $10 a barrel equivalent. And so given the low margins at the moment, that really constrains, indeed, future growth. But as I mentioned, there is not so much future growth at the moment beyond the project that is already well committed and already being constructed. A lot of people have already pulled out, like Statoil.
Right, David, you wanted to say?
I just wanted to say, in no way am I fighting with the on-the-ground activists who've achieved something very important. But I think if we really are to believe 95, 99% of our scientists that this is a world crisis, then the changes aren't going to be on the order of a small win, a small something here and there. And I'm not calling Keystone a small win. It's going to be on the order of consciousness changing. And it's big thinking. And to me, that's the excitement of today. Yes, it's a win here. You can debate the small aspects of it, but hopefully it's a turn. And, as McKibben said, we've got rising renewable energy. We've got the science behind us, and suddenly the activists have a win. And for them to have a win is an exciting thing, at least for me.
One thing we've heard from the Canadian oil industry themselves is that the era of uncontested tar sands pipelines is over. Fossil fuel infrastructure projects around the world are being fought by activists, be them local activists fighting for their livelihood, their land, their water on the ground, or climate activists like me, who don't want to light a fuse to one of the largest carbon bombs in the world.
Well, Patrick, do you agree? Are oil producers now on the defensive?
No, I don't think so at all. And I think the country as a whole is on the defensive because freedom of commerce is under attack. If you're so concerned about the environment, you have to look at studies that show that the richest nations are also the most environmentally conscious. And when you obstruct commerce and when you obstruct industries trying to produce their product more efficiency and less carbon intensively, which is what pipelines do, the United States has progressively become richer over the past, 100 years. And in that time, our carbon emissions have been reduced and the environment has become cleaner in the United States. And we're able to do that because we have disposable resources. And when you signal to an entire industry that the highest levels of power are against you, that creates a lot of consternation, and that's going to create disinvestment. And to say that alternative fuels and alternative energy sources are thriving, they're thriving on the backs of taxpayer subsidies. Billions of dollars. The wind production tax credit alone costs almost $15 billion. And so to say that they're thriving on an uneven playing field. And I don't think this is going to change a whole lot because we have 2.3 million miles of existing pipelines of all sorts here in the United States for natural gas, crude oil, jet fuel. And yet we don't see any sort of outcry about these things because they better our lives and that the market demands these things. And so I don't think this is some sort of huge victory, and nor do I see it as a huge defeat because I think the TransCanada Corporation is going to get this oil to the market because oil prices aren't going to stay at $40 a barrel forever. Oil prices fluctuate. All it could take is one little conflict in the Middle East for oil prices to skyrocket, and they will get the tar sands oil out because there will be a global market for it.
Jason, you want to respond to that?
I think this is proof that organizing works. To me, this is proof that organizing works. This is proof that social movements do have a political impact. Social movements kept fossil fuels in the ground by fighting the Keystone Pipeline for 5 years. 5 years ago, this was a done deal, as done a deal as they come in Washington. Secretary Clinton herself said she was inclined to approve the project. What changed in the last 5 years? Organizing. Organizing completely changed the politics of climate change in the last few years, and specifically this pipeline.
I don't think anybody...
But David,
I really want to ask Patrick, what if he really believes that alternative energy hasn't changed in the last 5 years? That's the cliche to call it sluggish and lagging behind, and it's just not true. It's thriving.
I mean, well, what are you citing there? You're just saying that it's thriving. I'm telling you that it costs taxpayers $15 billion. The last production tax credit cost taxpayers $15 billion, and they absorb a disproportionate amount of energy subsidies. You could get rid of oil and gas subsidies, and that industry will still turn a profit. If you get rid of the wind production tax credit, they're not going to build another windmill in this country. So it's hard to say that it's thriving when it has to operate in an uneven playing field on the backs of American industries that actually produce a product that people want to buy at an affordable price, unlike wind.
Yeah, but you have to account for all price.
Okay, Philippe, go ahead.
I think, I think the moment here is we need to account for social, environmental cost of the energy we're producing. And this is what this is about. This is about understanding that it's not only about the subsidies to production, but it's also about reducing the future costs. The oil and gas industry is obviously having costs that are, mediated through climate change. So we need to address this.
We don't, but we're not addressing the social cost of energy poverty. There's a reason why emerging economies are consuming a lot of coal, a lot of oil, and a lot of gas, because it's cheap and you're able to better people's lives by using these energy-dense fuels. I mean, let's stop acting like wind and solar is a new type of technology. Sure, we maybe have new ways to harness it a little more efficiently, but Christopher Columbus didn't get to the Americas on an oil-powered ship. So these are ancient technologies that we're trying to find new ways of harnessing, yet we were able to emerge from abject poverty, both because of free market. I let you.
One moment, David. Yeah, go ahead.
With free market capitalism and with more energy-dense resources that were discovered right around the same time.
Okay, we can talk about markets all day. At the end of the day, climate change is a moral issue. It's wrong to wreck the climate, and it's wrong to make billions of dollars while you wreck the climate.
Right.
This industry had more money, had more lobbyists, had more sway in D.C. They wanted to build this pipeline. Don't get them wrong.
Okay, David, a very quick response. I've got to take a break soon.
I would just say it's not just a moral issue, it's a survival issue. And I'd like Patrick to respond in terms of the actual facts of a warming world. I was in Alberta yesterday. Granted, I flew a plane that wasted a lot of fuel to get back to North Carolina. Both places were overheated. I mean, what about that? What about just the simple fact